just a few hours ago, my shver, Reb Shia Fishman, was nifter. Reb Yeshua Tzvi, Reb Binyamin Beinish, who was a Yid that dedicated his entire life to chinuch. First as a Rebbe for many years, then as a Menal, then he was in charge of the entire Torah Messiah, and he dedicated himself selflessly to the chinuch of Yiddish kinder. I thought, well, at least, even though I have to go, we'll at least learn something. L'schusoi u'le'ilui nishmasoi. Steht also, vayishma Yisro kohen midyon choisen Moshe es kol. Asher osa lekim leMoshe u'leYisrael amok yoytzi Hashem es Yisrael miMitzrayim. Rashi says, Ma shmue shoma ubo kriyas yamsuf u'melchemes amol. So, the question is, Ma shmue shoma. The pasuk spells it out. He heard es kol asher osa lekim leMoshe u'leYisrael amok yoytzi Hashem es Yisrael miMitzrayim. And it's even shverer because it says he heard kol asher osa lekim. And Rashi says, Kriyas Yamsuf u'Melchemes Amalek. Who's only these two things? He heard everything. So why is Rashi saying that he heard Kriyas Yamsuf u'Melchemes Amalek in particular? And then also the Lashon Mashmua Shoma Ubo. I mean, the pasuk is saying that Vayishma Yisro Kohen Midyan, and he came. Right. The question is Mashmua Shoma. The Ubo, we know from the Parsha that he came. What does Rashi have to say? Mashmua Shama Ubo. So it would seem that the pshat is like this: that the shaila is that Hitaka heard about everything. He heard about all the great miracles, and and he understood Ki Godel Hashem Mikol Ho'Elohim. But that's still not a reason for the Ubo. It's still not a reason that he should join Klal Yisrael and take upon himself a life of Torah and mitzvahs. He could be a believer where he is, and he could live by his convictions without taking on the tough ratio of Gimel mitzvahs and being Megayah. And that's the question. Mashmu Shama Ubo. In other words, he heard about the great miracles. He knows Ki Godel Hashem Mikol Elohim, but why Ubo? What convinced him to join Klal Yisrael? And the answer is Kriyas Yamsuf u'Melchemes Amalek. I mean, it says this idea in different nuschos. The point is that he saw there was Kriyas Yamsuf. And the nisim of Kriyas Yamsuf were nisparsim in the ganze Welt. Shamu amim yirgozun, chil ochaz yoishreit veloshes, oz nivalu alufei edoim, elei moyov yoichvei moy road. The entire world was shaken up by these great miracles. And after this gewaldige hisoirus, it says, Vayovay Amalek, Vayilochem em Yisrael berefidim. And as Chazal say, that korcha baderech, Rashi says, Loshen kor, v'choim tzinoncha v'hifshircha miresichoscha, Shehoyu kol ha'umois yireim lehilochem bachem, ubo zeh v'hischil, v'hera mokoim la'acherim, mosho la'am betiroi sachas, a burning hot bed. She'en kol biryo yechoyla leired l'soicha. Nobody can enter. Bo ben bliyal echad, kofatz v'yored l'soicha, afo pi shenichve, even though he was burnt. But hikra oisa b'fnei acherim, he cooled it off for others. So in other words, the entire world was an ambatia roisachas after the nisim of Kriyas Yamsuf, and people were afraid. People were afraid to be loichem against Yidden. There was a sense of yiras shamayim. And Amalek is asher korcha baderech. He cooled it off. So when Yisro realized that even after the great hisoirus and the spiritual awakening that came about through Kriyas Yamsuf, it was possible that Amalek should come and turn it around and korcha baderech and undo the whole hisoirus. He understood that the only way to hold on to one's convictions. The only way to make sure that the inspiration doesn't pass is by coming and taking upon yourself a derech chayim that holds on to those convictions. So therefore, Rashi is really asking Mashmur Shama Uba. He heard Kol Asher Asa, but that wasn't yet a reason for him to come. What in particular made him come? Kriyas Yamsuf or Milchemes Amalek. It doesn't say the Yeshua from Milchemes Amalek, the Nisim that happened in Milchemes Amalek. Milchemes Amalek. In other words, he saw that after Kriyas Yamsuf, Amalek came and fought against Klal Yisrael and cooled off the whole Assyria. So he understood that the only way that one can make sure that he holds on to his Assyria is by living by it. You know, there's a Sefer Emuna Ubitochen that's miyuchas to the Ramban, probably not from the Ramban, but from a Rishon, where he writes in Perik Yutes, V'da, you shall know, ki kol zman she'ha'adam mechashev b'toich liboy, shmoi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, echad min niflo isav. When a person is misboinen in the Chasdei Hashem, in the Niflois HaBoire, he thinks into Ruchnius and Elikus. Yesh lefon of his oirerus, kefi machsheves mailas ha'choyshev. Everybody on his madrega has an awakening. B'zeh she'omer HaKosav b'chol mokoy ma she'azkir es shmi avoy eilecha uveirachticha. Ukshe'haisoirerus ahi misoir al divrei reik b'ma yivarcheu. But if it's a spiritual awakening, but it's al davar reik, it doesn't have any practical expression, then b'ma yivarcheu. V'haloi roi el ha'hefech. He's roi to the hepech of bracha. Meaning, if a person has an awakening and he doesn't do something about it, so he actually loses from that experience because he's been there already, and he's been spiritually tickled, and it did nothing for him. So it could happen over and over again, and he's not going to move forward. So he's roi al ha'hepech if it's al divrei reik. The korev le'inyan zeh ma she'omer HaKosav im ta'iru ve'im ta'oiru es ahava ad shetechpatz. Now ta'iru and ta'oiru is a lotion of breaking. So he says that ad shetechpatz, until you put the hisoirerus into the ahava, into a chayfetz. He says it's miloshin ankuti chefze that we say by a shvur. Until you put it into a chayfetz, into a deed, into an act, it's breakable. Im ta'iru ve'im ta'oireru es ahava ad shetechpatz. Until it's techpatz, it's breakable. In the Kedushas Levi, he brings this in the Kedushas Levi on Shavuos. He says, "Shemer Rambam, k'shemagiel l'adam ezes oirus shel yira v'ahava la'habari baruch hu. Os take it from miyad yira lasis lo kli. Hainu sheyase take it as a mitzvah. Do something about it. The hainu sheyitn tzedakah or yeshev take it lilmoid v'kadoyme. Ki yodua shahis oirus haba la'adam befesa pisoin. Who oir hanishpa olav melamayla v'nikra b'chenes neshama. Azay tzorich adam lahalbisha beguf. He has to put that as oirus, which is a neshama, into a guf. B'chdei sheyeh lo chizuk ubosis shelo yeh mutachas v'shalom ki yodua le yoydei mada. You know, Chazal say lama nismacha Parshas Nozil, Parshas Soita, Aroya Soita B'kol Kula Yazir Asur Min Hayayin. The Welt asks, I mean, why? He sees the Soita B'kol Kula. He sees that crime is punished. He sees that it doesn't pay. He sees that bitna neifelas v'yirechot sova. So why would he? Why yirechot neifelas v'bitna sova? So why would he need now to be yazir atzmei min hayayin? So Reb Mendele Mivetepsk says that true. He now has an understanding that he didn't have before. He sees how bad and how horrible it is to be a soiter. But if he's not going to do something about it, it's going to be chochmasoi miruba mimaisav. And chochmasoi miruba mimaisav is a danger. As Chazal say, that it's like a tree with many branches and a shvache shorish, where any wind blows it over. And therefore he has to now v'yazir atzmei min hayayin, he has to put that new hasoge, he has to put that new hisoirus into a maisa. Like we know that the tefillin shel yad comes before the tefillin shel rosh. The yad represents action, the rosh represents understanding, and nasa has to come before the nishma. And we say even more. We say that you have to take off the tefillin shel rosh before the tefillin shel yad, and that's because kol zman shebein einecha yiyu shnayim. One should never have a hasoge that is not matched by the yad. The rosh without the yad is a sakona. Whenever there's a rosh, there has to be a yad. Wherever there's an understanding, there has to be an asiyah. And kol zman shebein einecha yiyu shnayim. Like it says, "V'anachnu lo neida ma b'ma navid es Hashem." Moshe Rabbeinu says to Pari, "Ad b'eiru shama." They say because every idea has to be acted on immediately, and therefore, ad b'eiru shama, we don't even know what we're supposed to do, because once we know, it's the time of doing. In the Noam Elimelech, he says in Parshas Kiseitze on the pasuk, "Kisovoi bekerem re'acha." V'achalta anovim kinafshecha ve'elkelyecha loisite. So he says that the inner meaning of this pasuk is kerem re'acha is the Torah, which is the kerem of re'acha v're'a avicha, the kerem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the vineyard of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And kisavoi bekerem re'acha is the pshat. The Yid comes into the Rebbeinu Shalom's kerem, he comes into the Torah, he could take as much as he wants. Yeah, v'achalta anovim kinafshecha. However, you can't put it in your pockets. You can't put it in your kalim to use it for later, to eat it later. In other words, a person has to immediately act on what he understands, and not el kelyecha loisitein. Like the pasuk says, Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem Seichel Toiv L'chol Oiseihem. The Gemara says in Brachas Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, L'loim Deyem Loy Nemar Elo L'oiseihem. In other words, that the Seichel Toiv of Torah is nisgala to those that do it. Loim Deyem, don't access the Seichel Toiv of Torah. Who accesses the Seichel Toiv of Torah? Only the Oiseihem. So in other words, the Shmuah Shama Ubo was that after Kriyas Yamsuf there was Milchemes Amalek, and therefore he understood that without taking upon himself a way of life that reflects his hasaga, he is going to lose his hasaga. But you know, it's interesting that it says Vayisape Moshe after all this, it says Vayisape Moshe lechoisnoi. Es kol asher osa Hashem lefaroi uleMitzrayim al oides Yisrael, es kol atlo asher metzosam baderech veyatzilem Hashem. Zokt Rashi, es kol atlo she'al hayam v'shel Amalek. The parsha began with the Shmuah Shama Uba Kriyas Yamsuf Milchemes Amalek, and many psukim later, when he finally meets Moshe Rabbeinu tells him, what does he tell him? Rashi says that he tells him the Tlo She'al Hayam v'Shel Amalek. And Rashi says, Vayisape Moshe l'choisnoi, limshoich liboy l'karvoi l'Torah. Limshoich liboy l'karvoi l'Torah. What do you mean, limshoich liboy l'karvoi l'Torah? He already came. As Rashi said, he came El HaMidbar. Rashi says, Af anu yoidim shebamidbar hoya. Ela b'shivchoi shel Yisro diber HaKosav, shel yoshev b'chvoidei shel olam. V'nedavai liboy l'tzeis el HaMidbar, mokem toyu l'shmoya divrei Torah. So he came. He was inspired. He came. He's here. And now Moshe Rabbeinu is limshoich liboy lekarvoy leTorah, and he tells him what? He tells him the Tlo She'al Hayam u'Milchemes Amalek, which he already knew, and that was the reason that he came. Mashmur Shama Uba. With Weiss that there are two sides to the Milchemes Amalek, the Kriyas Yamsuf Milchemes Amalek. On one hand, you could see Avada, the great miracles that the Rebbeinu Shalom did, but that's still not enough to be miskaref to Torah be'emes, because as the Rambam says in Perek Yudalad Mihilchos Yisurei Bia, Ketzad mekablin geirei hatzedek. How do we receive geirim? K'sheyovili is Gaia, the Yivdiku Akra, v'lo yimtzu ilo. We don't find any ulterior motive. Yeah, he looks honest and real. Oimrim loy, Mara Isa Shebasali is Gaia. What is it? What are you up to? Why are you Basal is Gaia? Iato yoidea. Do you not know she is Yisro b'zman hazeh dvuyim, udchufim, umesuchafim, umeturafim, v'yisurim boim aleim? Do you not know about the Jewish suffering? So we know that he's coming for a good reason. I mean, it's Elohim Su'ilo. I mean, we know that he has all the right kavanas. But we say that's not enough. He has to know that it's not easy. It's not simple. And you know, you could be all inspired, and you think that it's great. That's not enough. Yisro, he heard about all these great miracles. Moshe Rabbeinu tells him, "Es kol hatlo'o asher al hayam ve'umulchemes amalek." You think that it began with the end? You think that it was all good? You think it was only miracles? There was a lot of suffering until we got there. I mean, the pshat is "Es kol hatlo Hashem etzosam," and then that's the limshech liboy lehiskarev l'Torah, because one could only be miskarev l'Torah if he understands that it's a long, difficult journey to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom. And that's why ein mekabling gerim b'mei shloimim b'pnei she Yisrael shruyim b'roiv toiva. The Gemara says in Yevamos Daf Ayin Vav. When things are good, we're not mekabel gerim. Now at this point, things were very good, but in order for Moshe Rabbeinu to bring Yisrael to the madrega that he's royally his guy, he has to tell him about the kol hatlo, that he should understand the difficulties. Yeah, this is today a problem because, you know, I mean, this is not only about Gerim, obviously, even though Avada, only Gerim we could discourage from embracing Yiddishkeit, whereas Yidden we shouldn't be discouraging. But nevertheless, the marketing of Yiddishkeit as it's all great and it's all good and it's a recipe for a happy life is maybe not so... is not the real way of limshoich liboy lekarvoy leTorah. There has to be also some dogesh on the difficulty, because it's important that people know the truth, that it's not so easy, and that they take upon themselves, in spite of that, the avodas Hashem and the avdus Hashem. Anyway, Rabbi Say, I wish you a good Shabbos. Und Besoires Teufels.